Commander Veltar stretched his forearms and settled into his observation chair aboard the Hegemony Dreadnought Eternal Watch. Another day, another pointless conflict to monitor. His species had been keeping peace in this sector for over 300 years, and honestly, most disputes follow the same boring pattern. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Kythera colony on Valdris Prime, his communications officer announced. Veltar's main eyes rolled while his secondary pair remained focused on the tactical display. The Kythera were plant-like beings, peaceful farmers who had discovered a rich deposit of rare minerals on their little world. Unfortunately for them, the Skarn had also discovered it. Put it through, Veltar sighed, already knowing what he would hear. A green, bark-skinned Kythera appeared on his screen, trembling with obvious fear. "Commander, please, we need help. The Skarn fleet approaches our world. They demand we surrender our mining rights. But this is our home." Veltar had seen the scenario play out dozens of times. The Skarn were the galaxy's most feared raiders. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick gray scales, with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed for tearing flesh. They hunted in packs, just like their primitive ancestors, and they never left survivors. The Kythera, on the other hand, were gentle creatures who could barely hurt a fly. "I understand your situation," Veltar replied diplomatically. "However, hegemony law prevents us from interfering in territorial disputes between non-member species. You know this." The Kythera's leaf-like appendages drooped. "But, Commander, there must be something. Actually, there might be." Another voice interrupted the transmission. A human stepped into view beside the frightened Kythera. Veltar blinked his 4 eyes in surprise. Humans rarely got involved in local conflicts. The human was average height for his species, maybe 6 feet tall, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He wore a simple green military uniform with sergeant stripes on his sleeves. Nothing impressive about him at all. "I'm Staff Sergeant Tom Blake, Terran Defense Force," the human said. "We've received a formal request for military assistance from the Kythera government. I'm authorized to provide tactical support." Veltar couldn't help but laugh. "Sergeant, with all due respect, my sensors show 47 Skarn battle cruisers approaching the system. Each ship carries roughly 50 warriors. That's over 2,000 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators. And you're one human." Blake's expression didn't change. "That's correct, sir. You do realize the Skarn have conquered 17 star systems in the past decade? They've wiped out entire species. Their tactics are flawless. Their warriors unstoppable. What exactly do you plan to do against them?" "My job," Blake answered simply. Veltar exchanged glances with his bridge crew. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their diplomacy, their art, their fascinating literature. They ran some of the best restaurants on civilized worlds. They made excellent engineers and teachers. But warriors? Veltar had never heard of humans fighting anyone. "Very well," Veltar said, deciding to let events play out. "I'll observe and document the engagement for hegemony records. Try not to get the colonists killed with your heroics." The transmission ended, and Veltar turned to his tactical officer. "How long until the Skarn arrive?" 6 hours, sir." "Perfect." Veltar ordered his ship to maintain safe distance and began preparing his report. Another minor species about to be enslaved or eliminated, with one delusional human thrown into the mix. He'd seen conquered worlds before. The aftermath was never pretty. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting Skarn ships dropping out of hyperspace." On the main screen, the sleek black vessels of the Skarn fleet materialized like hungry sharks. Their ships were designed for intimidation as much as warfare, with jagged edges and weapon ports that glowed red like angry eyes. Veltar watched the lead Skarn vessel broadcast its usual message to the colony below: "Surrender your mining operations and evacuate immediately or face total destruction. You have 1 hour to comply." Down on the planet's surface, Veltar could see the Kythera colonists running around in panic, gathering their families and belongings. But his sensors also detected something interesting. The human wasn't panicking. Sergeant Blake was calmly walking through the colony, examining the industrial equipment, the defensive positions, even the landscape itself. Strange behavior for someone about to die, Veltar muttered to himself. His communications officer looked up. "Sir, should we prepare to record the battle?" "Absolutely," Veltar replied, settling back to watch what would surely be the shortest military engagement in galactic history. One human against the most feared warriors in known space. This would make an interesting footnote in his report, if nothing else. The Skarn were already launching their dropships. The Skarn dropships descended like metal vultures, their engines screaming through the thin atmosphere of Valdris Prime. Veltar watched through his ship's sensors as the first wave of warriors poured out onto the colony's landing pads. Even from orbit, he could see the intimidating silhouettes of the Skarn soldiers as they formed their battle lines. Textbook deployment. Veltar's tactical officer observed. They're using the standard pack formation, 3 groups of 15 warriors each, with the remaining forces held in reserve. Veltar nodded, making notes in his official log. The Skarn never varied their tactics because they never needed to. Why change a strategy that had conquered dozens of worlds? Their method was brutally simple and effective. The lead pack would charge the main defensive positions, drawing enemy fire and attention. Meanwhile, the second pack would flank around the sides, cutting off escape routes. The third pack would hunt down any survivors trying to hide. Down on the planet's surface, the Kythera colonists were doing exactly what every other species did when facing the Skarn. They huddled behind makeshift barriers, clutching whatever weapons they could find. Most held simple mining tools or hunting rifles. A few had military-grade energy weapons, probably bought from traders passing through the system. "Poor creatures," Veltar muttered. "They have no idea what's coming." The Kythera had set up their defenses around the main settlement, using overturned mining vehicles and stacks of metal containers as cover. It wasn't a bad defensive position, but it wouldn't matter. The Skarn would simply overwhelm them through sheer numbers and superior fighting ability. But something caught Veltar's attention. His sensors were tracking all the heat signatures on the planet's surface, and one of them wasn't behaving like the others. While every Kythera colonist was either running toward the defensive positions or fleeing toward the evacuation shuttles, one human-sized figure was moving in the opposite direction. "Computer, enhance grid section 7 Alpha," Veltar commanded. The main screen zoomed in on the colony's industrial sector. There, clear as day, was Staff Sergeant Blake. But instead of joining the desperate defenders or helping with the evacuation, he was walking calmly through the maze of mining equipment and storage facilities. "What is that human doing?" Veltar's communications officer asked. Veltar frowned, all 4 of his eyes focusing on the strange behavior. Blake moved with purpose, but not toward any obvious objective. He would stop at certain pieces of machinery, examine them briefly, then move on. Sometimes he would duck into a storage building, emerge a few minutes later, and continue his odd journey deeper into the industrial complex. "Sir, the Skarn are beginning their advance," the tactical officer reported. On screen, the grayscale warriors were moving forward in perfect formation. Their leader, a massive Skarn with battle scars covering his arms, raised his energy rifle and let out a bone-chilling war cry. The sound echoed across the colony, causing several Kythera defenders to drop their weapons in terror. The first exchange of fire began. Energy beams flashed between the Skarn attackers and the Kythera defenders. It was immediately clear who had the advantage. The colonists' shots went wild, their hands shaking with fear. The Skarn, meanwhile, fired with deadly precision, their shots finding gaps in the improvised fortifications. "This will be over in 10 minutes, Veltar predicted, updating his log. The Kythera resistance is collapsing already. But his sensors kept tracking that lone human figure. Blake had now disappeared completely into the industrial complex, moving through areas where the sensor readings became fuzzy due to all the metal and machinery. Veltar could catch glimpses of him occasionally, but the humans seemed to be following some kind of planned route through the facility. "Commander," his sensor operator called out, "I'm losing track of the human." Too much interference from the mining equipment. Veltar leaned forward in his chair. "Keep scanning. I want to know where he went." The battle outside was proceeding exactly as expected. The main Skarn force had engaged the defenders while 2 smaller groups began moving around the flanks. Several Kythera had already fallen, and the rest were beginning to panic. Some were abandoning their positions and running toward the evacuation shuttles. But the Skarn weren't letting anyone escape. Their flanking forces had cut off the main escape routes, trapping the colonists in a deadly crossfire. It was brutal, efficient, and completely predictable. "Sir, should I continue tracking the human?" the sensor operator asked. "He appears to have entered some kind of maintenance tunnel system." Veltar paused in his note-taking. In all his years of observing conflicts, he had never seen anyone abandon a defensive position to go underground during an active battle. It made no tactical sense whatsoever. "Yes, keep tracking him," Veltar ordered. "I want to document this tactical error for the report, because that's all it could be, right? A panic human making a fatal mistake under pressure." Within minutes, the Skarn hunting packs would track him down in those tunnels. Blake would die alone, cut off from any help, his final moments spent hiding in the dark like a frightened animal. The Skarn war cries grew louder as they pressed their attack. Victory was within their grasp, just like always. At least, that's what everyone watching believed. The main battle was going exactly as Veltar had predicted. The Kithira defenders were falling back under heavy fire, their makeshift barriers offering little protection against Skarn energy weapons. But the real slaughter will begin when the hunting packs did their work. War leader Grak stood on a pile of twisted metal, surveying the battlefield with satisfaction. His main force had the colonists pinned down, but the real prize was always in the hunt. Scattered prey trying to hide or escape was where the Skarn truly excelled. It was in their nature, bred into them over millions of years of evolution. "Send Hunter Pack Vex into the industrial sector," Grak commanded through his comm device. One human went that way. Find him and make an example. Veltar watched as 5 Skarn warriors broke away from the main group and headed toward the maze of mining equipment where Blake had disappeared. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Hunter packs were elite units, trained from birth to track and kill. Each warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, their gray scale scarred from countless battles. Their claws could tear through metal, and their enhanced senses could track a target across continents. Pack leader Vex reporting. Came the gravelly voice over Grak's comm. "We're entering the industrial complex now." Human scent detected. Veltar leaned forward in his chair, all 4 eyes focused on his sensor display. The 5 heat signatures representing the Skarn hunters moved confidently into the maze of machinery and storage buildings. They spread out in their traditional formation, covering all possible escape routes. It was a perfect hunting pattern, refined over centuries of warfare. Target located. Vex reported, moving to engage. Then something strange happened. Veltar sensors detected a brief flash of energy from deep within the industrial complex. It lasted less than a second, then everything went quiet. "Vex, report your status," Grak commanded from his position, overlooking the main battle. "Silence." Pack leader Vex responded immediately. Still nothing. Veltar frowned, checking his sensor readings. The 5 Skarn heat signatures had simply vanished. Not moved out of range, not hidden behind interference. Vanished. Technical malfunction? His sensor operator suggested. Before Veltar could respond, Grak's voice crackled over the intercepted communications. "Hunter Pack Zal, proceed to industrial sector. Vex Pack has gone silent. Investigate and eliminate all targets." Another group of Skarn warriors headed into the complex, this time 7 strong. They moved more cautiously than the first pack, weapons raised and senses alert. These were veterans, survivors of dozens of battles. "Something's wrong here," pack leaders all reported as his team entered the maze. "I smell blood, but it's not human." Veltar watched the 7 new heat signatures spread out through the facility. They were being smart, checking every corner, moving as a coordinated unit. These warriors had survived this long by being careful and deadly. "Contact!" Zal shouted suddenly. "We've found." The transmission cut off. Another brief energy flash appeared on Veltar's sensors. Then 12 Skarn warriors had simply disappeared into the industrial complex. "This is impossible," Veltar muttered. His tactical officer nodded in agreement, equally baffled by what they were seeing. Down on the planet, War Leader Grak was no longer focused on the main battle. His attention was fixed entirely on the industrial sector, where two of his best hunting packs had vanished without a trace. The Skarn had conquered 17 star systems, and never once had they lost contact with an entire hunting pack. All units, halt advance, Grak ordered. Hunter pack more. 10 warriors to the industrial sector. Full battle formation. Report every 30 seconds. This time, Grak was taking no chances. 10 of his most experienced fighters moved toward the complex, weapons charged and ready for anything. They advanced slowly, checking every possible hiding spot, calling out positions to each other constantly. Sector A7 clear, came the first report. Sector A8 clear, came the second. Moving to be sector now, reported pack leader Moore. Then the reports stopped coming. Veltar watched his sensor display in amazement as 10 more Skarn heat signatures blinked out of existence. 22 elite warriors had entered that industrial complex, and none had come back out. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of service." On the planet's surface, War Leader Grak was pacing back and forth, his scarred face twisted with rage and confusion. In over 200 battles, he had never lost a single hunting pack. Now he had lost 3 packs to one human, who should have been cowering in terror. What kind of creature is this? Grak growled to his remaining officers. 22 warriors don't just disappear, but they had disappeared. And somewhere in that maze of machinery and shadows, Staff Sergeant Blake was still moving. Veltar sensors occasionally caught glimpses of a single human heat signature, calm and steady, methodically working its way through the industrial complex. "Commander," Veltar's tactical officer said nervously, "according to our database, nothing like this has ever happened in recorded galactic history. Individual warriors have killed multiple enemies before, but never entire hunting packs. And never Skarn hunting packs." Veltar stared at his display, watching that single human signature continue its steady movement through the complex. Whatever was happening down there, it was rewriting everything the galaxy thought it knew about human combat capabilities. The hunted had somehow become the hunter. War Leader Grak had conquered 17 star systems. He had personally killed over 300 enemies in hand-to-hand combat. His battle scars were proof of victories that spanned decades. But standing there on the battlefield of Valdris Prime, watching his elite hunting packs vanish into thin air, something inside him snapped. Enough of this madness. Grak roared, his voice echoing across the colony. "All units, abandon the Kithira. Every warrior, into that complex now. I want that human brought to me in pieces." Veltar watched in fascination as the Skarn completely abandoned their textbook tactics. Instead of maintaining formation and securing their conquered positions, every single warrior on the battlefield turned toward the industrial complex. 43 of the galaxy's most feared fighters charged toward the maze of machinery where one human waited. "Sir, this is unprecedented," Veltar's tactical officer whispered. The Skarn never abandoned strategic positions. Never. But Grak was beyond strategy now. His pride, his reputation, everything his species stood for was being challenged by a single member of a species known for making good coffee and writing poetry. It was unthinkable. It was impossible. And it was happening. The first wave of Skarn warriors crashed into the industrial complex like an angry flood. They poured through every entrance, climbing over machinery, tearing through storage containers, their energy weapons blazing as they fired at shadows and movement. Then the explosions began. The first blast came from the main power distribution center. A massive ball of fire erupted skyward, taking out the primary electrical grid for half the complex. But it wasn't random destruction. As the flames cleared, Veltar realized the explosion had collapsed a section of overhead conveyor belts, creating a perfect barrier that channeled the Skarn forces into 3 narrow choke points. Brilliant, Veltar breathed. He's using the infrastructure against them. The second explosion came from the fuel depot. But again, it wasn't just random destruction. The blast sent a wave of burning liquid cascading down the main corridor, forcing the Skarn to retreat into the maintenance tunnels, exactly where Blake wanted them. Through his sensors, Veltar watched as the human's heat signature moved with calculated precision through the chaos. Blake wasn't running or hiding anymore. He was conducting a symphony of destruction, and every explosion was perfectly timed. A group of 8 Skarn warriors tried to flank through the eastern section of the complex. They found themselves trapped when Blake triggered a controlled collapse of a storage tower, sealing both ends of the corridor. The warriors were forced to climb over tons of twisted metal, making them perfect targets for the improvised explosive devices Blake had apparently placed throughout the facility. How is one person doing this? Grax screamed over his comm, his voice cracking with rage and disbelief. Another explosion answered him. This time, Blake had rigged the main mining laser to overload. The massive beam of energy that was designed to cut through solid rock instead sliced through the central support structure of the refinery building. The entire facility came crashing down, taking out 15 more Skarn warriors who had been trying to use the high ground for a tactical advantage. Veltar realized he was watching something that had never happened before in galactic history. The Skarn weren't just losing. They were being systematically dismantled by someone who understood their psychology better than they understood themselves. He's turned their aggression into a weakness, Veltar said, making rapid notes in his log. The more angry they get, the more mistakes they make. Blake emerged from the smoke and flames of the collapsing refinery, and for the first time, Veltar got a clear visual of the human. His uniform was torn and covered in soot, but his movements were calm and deliberate. In his hands was a weapon that Veltar didn't recognize at first, then realized was a mining tool that Blake had somehow modified into a combat device. But it wasn't just the improvised weapons that made Blake dangerous. It was the way he moved through the battlefield like he owned it. Every step was calculated. Every action had a purpose. He wasn't fighting the Skarn. He was teaching them a lesson about the difference between brutality and warfare. A pack of 6 warriors tried to corner him near the communications tower. Blake didn't run. Instead, he triggered another explosion that brought down power lines across the area. The electrical cables whipped through the air like angry snakes, and suddenly the Skarn found themselves dodging lethal amount of electricity while trying to track a target who had already moved to his next position. "Impossible," Grack whispered, his voice barely audible over the comm. "This isn't how battles work. This isn't how anything works." But Blake was rewriting the rules as he went. Every piece of industrial equipment became a weapon. Every building became a trap. Every advantage the Skarn thought there was turned against them with ruthless efficiency. Veltar watched the tactical display in amazement as the Skarn force count dropped steadily. 50 warriors had become 40, then 30, then 20, and through it all, that single human heat signature moved through destruction like a ghost, always one step ahead, always in control. The hunter had not just become the hunted. The hunter had become something far more dangerous. He had become a predator. The silence was deafening. For the first time in over an hour, no explosions echoed across the industrial complex. No energy weapons fired. No Skarn war cries pierced the air. Veltar stared at his tactical display, unable to believe what his sensors were telling him. 57 Skarn warriors had entered the battle. The readout showed 57 casualties, 0 survivors. On the human side, the display showed 1 active life sign. Staff Sergeant Blake was not only alive, but his vital signs indicated he wasn't even seriously injured. A few elevated stress markers, slightly increased heart rate, but nothing that suggested he had just single-handedly eliminated an entire raiding party of the galaxy's most feared warriors. "This has to be a sensor malfunction," Veltar's tactical officer whispered. "Run a full diagnostic on all systems." But even as the computer verified that all sensors were functioning perfectly, Veltar knew what he had witnessed was real. Through the smoke and debris of the destroyed industrial complex, a single figure emerged. Blake walked calmly through the wreckage, stepping over fallen beams and scattered equipment, like he was taking a casual stroll through a park. "Commander Veltar." Blake's voice came through the communication channel, as steady and professional as if he was ordering lunch. "This is Staff Sergeant Blake requesting immediate extraction for Kithier colonists. The threat has been neutralized." Veltar found himself speechless. How could anyone sound so calm after what had just happened? The human had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. He had faced odds that would have terrified entire armies, and emerged without even breathing hard. "Sergeant," Veltar finally managed to say, "please confirm your status. Are you injured? Do you require medical assistance?" "Negative, Commander. I'm operational. The colonists are secure and ready for evacuation. We'll need transport for approximately 200 individuals." The matter-of-fact tone in Blake's voice sent chills down Veltar's spine. This wasn't bravado or post-battle adrenaline. This was a professional soldier reporting the completion of a routine mission, as if eliminating 57 elite warriors was just another day at the office. Down on the planet's surface, the surviving Kittir colonists were emerging from their hiding places, staring in amazement at the destruction around them. The industrial complex looked like it had been hit by a small asteroid, but somehow their homes and families were untouched. Blake had managed to contain all the damage to the areas where the Skarn had been operating. "Sir," Veltar's communications officer said quietly, "I'm receiving reports from other hegemony ships in the sector. Word of this engagement is already spreading. Command wants a full report immediately." Veltar nodded, but his mind was racing. For over 300 years, the galaxy had known humans as peaceful traders, skilled diplomats, and brilliant scientists. They ran the best restaurants on civilized worlds. They wrote beautiful poetry and created art that moved people to tears. They were the species you called when you needed a complex engineering problem solved or a delicate negotiation handled. Nobody had ever thought to ask what humans were like when they went to war. "Computer, access all files on human military history," Veltar commanded. Accessing hegemony database on Terran military capabilities. The computer responded. "Warning. Files are incomplete. Most human conflicts occurred before galactic contact. Available data consists primarily of diplomatic and trade records." That was the problem, Veltar realized. The galaxy had first encountered humanity during their peaceful expansion period. By the time humans joined galactic community, they had already moved beyond large-scale warfare on their homeworld. Every interaction other species had with humans involved their diplomats, scientists, and civilians. "Sir, incoming transmission from Earth Command," his communications officer announced. A new face appeared on the screen. A middle-aged human woman in a crisp military uniform, with short gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. "Commander Veltar, this is General Patricia Hayes, Terran Defense Force. We understand you've been observing Sergeant Blake's mission. General, I must say your soldier performance was unprecedented." Veltar replied carefully. General Hayes smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "Blake is good at his job, Commander, but he's not special. Every human soldier receives similar training. We've just never had reason to demonstrate our capabilities on such a visible scale before." The implication hit Veltar like a physical blow. Blake wasn't some superhuman warrior or special forces operative. He was a standard human soldier, which meant there were millions more just like him scattered across human space. "I see," Veltar said slowly. "General, may I ask why humanity has kept these capabilities so quiet?" "We prefer peace, Commander. War is something we're very good at, which is exactly why we try to avoid it. Today's demonstration was unfortunate, but necessary. Sometimes you have to remind the galaxy that being peaceful doesn't mean being weak." As the transmission ended, Veltar sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. Everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity was wrong. They weren't just peaceful traders and scientists. They were apex predators who had chosen to be peaceful. There was a massive difference between those two things. "Begin composing a priority message to Hegemony High Command," Veltar ordered. "Recommend immediate revision of humanity's threat assessment. Classification level, maximum priority." The galaxy was about to learn a very important lesson about the difference between being harmless and being peaceful, and Veltar suspected this was just the beginning.